And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen, standing at the ready to fight anew the issues that matter today on this fine Thursday here at CR Podcast. Your host, Daniel Horowitz, back here to discuss our future, the issues that matter. I was thinking today, who is it? Name me the organization, name me the people, elected, unelected influencers, podcaster, bros, writers. Who is it that has a plan to build something beyond President Trump? Okay. I mean, his star is going to be waning. He's termed out. Democrats are going to crush it. We're ignoring all the primaries this year. How are we going to create and reconstitute a movement that we used to try to grow, at least attempted to grow, to live out our culture, our economic vision, our standard of living in at least a minority of the country, in at least the reddest states? Pick the ones that Trump won by 15 to 20 points or more. This should be the question we're all asking, because now all my colleagues recognize that even the SAVE Act, which is very much a side issue, if you think about it, they can't even pass that, won't pass it. And I figured I'd bring on today Andy Roth of the State Freedom Caucus network, because he is the only one thinking of building something beyond this just algorithm, whatever is put down that pipe, no thought to what we believe. People that actually are grounded in things that are beyond what does Trump think at a given moment, the Republican leadership, and they're actually trying to conserve what we have in red states and then make them actually red. That is continuously going to be my focus. Andy is the only one doing that. So I'm going to bring him on. But there's a lot going on nationally. And I wasn't even considering talking about this, but a lot of you have seen me on Twitter at RM Conservative doing this. I know I'm censored there. But you think about Republicans who have failed to pass a single bill in regular order, get it signed by Trump, to fulfill any of the campaign promises. Nothing on healthcare, inflation, cost of living, nothing on immigration moratorium, even partial immigration moratorium, judicial reform, even changing the INA in a way that we can get out illegal aliens. Nothing has been done. But now the one bill that the Senate leadership and the White House are behind is Elizabeth Warren's socialist Section 8 housing bill. And the fact that I'm the only one on the right even discussing it, much less viscerally opposing it, demonstrates the need for this conversation about the State Freedom Caucuses, which is that we don't have a movement that even knows what it believes. It's so dumb that you could put something on Twitter and have the first 5 influencers and or Trump himself support it, and it could be the biggest anathema to anything we believe in, and they'd support it. They don't know what to think, good, bad. I joked around today, Democrats could pass Obamacare, something of that magnitude and devastating consequence, overnight with Republican support, and not a single guy on the right would even bat an eyelash or care about it. And in fact, if the right people and Trump would support it, they would support it. And their organizations on their legislative scorecard would score in favor of it. So this House bill is something that quintessentially the organizations would have been screaming about, scoring against, and yet we hear nothing. We hear absolutely nothing from them. So what I'm talking about here is obviously this bipartisan housing bill, HR 6644, the Road Act, ROAD, as amended by the House. And before I just go through the provisions again, I've talked about this before. A lot of people don't realize what's happening here. Trump came out with this policy that he didn't want institutional investors to own too many houses. So a lot of people on the right support it. In a vacuum, I support it, although it's not the cause of the housing problem. It's a symptom. And it's actually a delayed reaction to a symptom that's being rectified because institutional investors are selling off their houses precisely because they know the market's going to crash and prices are coming down. And Trump is committed to actually keeping prices up for seniors, which is a part of this bill to subsidize even more building, more incentives to get people into housing when you just need to stay out of it and stop fueling the bubble. But anyway, I'm okay codifying a partial ban, which it does. But this bill, the foundation of it from Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott was created long before this policy of Trump. So last night in committee, they tacked this provision on, but that's not the main point of it. And the utility of that provision is not enough to weigh against the negative nature of what is in the crux of the bill. So the crux of this socialist housing bill is not just the fact that it's, spends too much money, expands HUD's authority, grows the very programs that Trump in every budget promised to eliminate. It's that this bill sits at the nexus of the most dangerous assault on Red America, the continuity of our communities, our demographics, our culture, our vitality. Everyone's talking about what? How these blue areas, these Democrats come in, turn over red areas, saturate them with overdevelopment that they don't need, saturate them with wind, solar, carbon capture, data centers, Section 8 housing, all this stuff. This bill literally uses a guidance and incentives from the feds, codifies it into law to work with RINO local governments, because even the reddest areas, the local governments are all bought out by developers. And all of these Acorn, Habitat for Humanity, left-wing political infrastructure groups to politically and culturally gerrymander your neighborhood with Section 8. By the way, at a time when we have an oversaturation, everyone in the housing industry would agree with what I'm saying, even if you believe there's areas where there's a tight supply, but the South is overbuilt, which is why prices are coming down. And if you let it come down, it will come down a lot more. We don't need more supply. That is not the problem. This entire bill is built upon an erroneous premise. It makes no sense. So Section 101 of H.R. 6644 requires HUD to publish guidelines and best practices for state and local zoning reforms to increase housing supply. You know what that means, folks. This is literally what Obama tried to do, that we all screamed about when we used to have a movement, that he's trying to move Section 8 into our areas and turn red areas blue. Now, look. We all understand that there are certain areas, particularly in blue areas, but sometimes in red areas, where there's onerous county or HOA level restrictions and regulations. But my gosh, folks, weighed against the threat of not having zoning or not having the autonomy at a local level to determine that, and having the feds determine it when they're trying to rezone everything for solar, wind, data centers, Section 8. You do not want to give up that authority. If you have problems, fight that at a local level. And if you can't succeed in your Trump plus 30 county, you sure as heck aren't going to fight the feds on this. You don't want to relinquish that control. Why would we want to incentivize and create all these competitive grants for local governments and blue developers to saturate our suburbs? Again, think about your suburban, exurban, or rural red area. Do you want the federal government placing guidance? Now, it's not a mandate, but all these RINO governments care about are economic grants, economic development. So they give these little carrots. If you basically, Section 102, competitive grants to local governments, to create pattern books for expedited permitting of mixed income affordable structures. What the hell do you think that means? You know what that means. Section 103, HUD to issue guidelines, model codes for single stair, multi-family buildings up to 6 stories. Folks, there's a time and a place for that, but we don't want these things in other areas, and you need the decision-making authority at the local level to ensure that doesn't happen. This bill is a nuclear bomb. Passing this is worse than not passing the SAVE Act. And yet nobody is scoring against it. No one's activated on it. Section 202 creates a new federal grant program to fund local housing projects in designated zones. It's a warmed over version of the community engineering schemes the Obama HUD did pushed a decade ago. Section 209 establishes a $200 million yearly fund at HUD to award innovative housing reforms to localities that reshape zoning to favor dense, subsidized units. What do you think that is? And again, we don't need it in the South. We don't need it in most red areas. They're overdeveloped. Everyone knows that. And if you want more development, deal with that at the local level. You do not want the federal government doing it. But notice this ties into data centers, that the number one goal of Trump and Senate Republicans is to shove down our throats the use and rape of our land for everything that it shouldn't be used for. This is the number one fight. It's utterly ridiculous. Anyway, before I get too mad, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Policy Genius. You know, as the winter transitions into spring in the coming days, you find everything comes alive. Trees get rejuvenated, the grass starts to grow, but you know, humans don't live forever, at least not in this world. And it's a time to remember our mortality. Now more than ever, people are dying young for a variety of reasons. If your family relies on you for income, particularly with the cost of living, you need to make sure you have enough life insurance, which most people do not have enough. A lot of people took out plans. I had this problem pre-Great Reset, where maybe you needed a $500,000 for a family. Now you need $1 million. So Policy Genius is not a insurance company. They prioritize your peace of mind by aggregating apples to apples comparison. You punch it in, they spit back a quote so quickly. By the way, they do it with homeowners and car insurance as well, so you could use it for that. But for life insurance, they have a licensed team of insurance brokers that will help you with it. And the thing is, they just want to get you the lowest rate. They don't work for any one company over the other. That's not how they earn their keep. That's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews. So protect the life you've built with Policy Genius. You can see today, if you could find a 20-year life insurance term plan starting at just $276 per year for $1 million in coverage. It's really the only insurance that has not gone up exponentially, like car and health insurance and homeowners. So head over to policygenius.com today to compare life insurance quotes from top companies and save you peace of mind today by saving for your family's future tomorrow. So anyway, this stupid communist housing bill, it also expands the community block grant program, the home program, 2 programs that Trump in every budget promised to cut, actually eliminate, with the understanding that these NGOs and developers are nothing but political infrastructure at the local level for the left. And again, this bill is so dangerous because, like, there's one thing if red counties were governed by people like you and me. So officially, there's no mandate in here. It's guidance and incentives. But as you well know, the biggest kryptonite of 90% of local Republican leaders, probably even more so than the state ones and the legislators, like the county guys, is all about economic development and the land developers and getting donations from them. This bill will set into motion an irrevocable and transformational pipeline of endless funds to flow to local RINOs and Democrat politicians and Democrat NGOs and local land and housing developers to support rezoning in a way that is going to take your suburban, exurban, and rural red county and turn it into utter trash, Section 8, overdevelopment. And this is going to tie into, wouldn't surprise me if they find ways to use this for data centers as well. It's the same theme. This, my friends, is not just a side thing. This is going to be the one bipartisan bill that they actually plan on enacting under this GOP trifecta. And you look in the House, so the House is balking at it, but ironically, their main concern is just that it doesn't include a provision banning central digital bank currency. Like, that's a side issue. They want to put that in there. They can never inveigh against the meat and potatoes of the bill. I think there are a few that are starting to see my work and they're starting to jump on that. So hopefully we'll block it in the House, even though the House already passed a version of this. I just want to share an observation with you that really ties into the theme of the day, that the very elements of the right that were supposed to be not special interest, not corporate interest, more in tune with the grassroots, whether they're your favorite podcaster, your, favorite publication, your favorite think tank or NGO on the right, that used to scream bloody murder about this sort of stuff. They don't even care, or they don't even know what to think. They're so caught in this mindset of they have no thoughts of their own. So whatever Trump puts out, that's what they'll focus on. Whatever he doesn't put out, they won't focus on. And if what he does put out is good, they'll either support it or they'll remain silent about it, but they certainly won't oppose it. You know what was funny? Do you know the only senator who spoke out against, that I could see, this bill? Now, there were about 10 of them or 8 of them who voted against cloture. So Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Mike Johnson, not Mike Johnson, Senator Johnson from Wisconsin. A couple others voted against the bill. Rick Scott of Florida did. But Tom Tillis is like, my God, when did conservative Republicans start carrying Elizabeth Warren's banner on housing strategy? Now, some of this is kind of like in reverse. Like, once you're a liberal on so many issues and you're opposing Trump from the left, so then, you want to gum up the works. Why not, when you actually have a conservative talking point, why not utilize it? So some of that's a little bit of that going on too. But I do find it funny that there is some profundity to this, that Tom Tillis, say what you want about it, he might be a conduit for K Street, but he's not a conduit for Trump or this just cultish. Say what you want about Tom Tillis, he's not an algorithmic bot. He's just more of a traditional special interest K Street guy. This bill is not really a priority of most of those people. It has its special interests, but it's just kind of random. So he's like, since when were conservatives for more HUD, which fuels the bubble? But what I'm telling you, worse than even fueling the housing bubble, it is going to oversaturate overdevelopment in places that are already overdeveloped and bring in Section 8 and all sorts of problems accompanying that. It literally has it in the bill, mixed income. And freaking Tom Tillis is the only guy opposing it. This is unsustainable. We can't go on like this. We got to do better. We got to do better. And yet we're not. You look at the primaries, and where are we? In Mississippi on Tuesday night, I didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday. So both parties had senatorial primaries. And Cindy Hyde-Smith, she won with 82%. It used to be we got an automatic 30% against any RINO. Even just a name filed. This person spent a good hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, I know there's questions about who she really was, but that's not why people didn't vote for her. It's just that they reflexively vote for the incumbent endorsed by Trump. So now 82%, that's similar to what Greg Abbott got, by the way. And you know what's interesting? Democrats came within 15,000 votes of matching Republican turnout in freaking Mississippi. Compared to 2018, which was a bad year for Republicans, the Republican turnout was down 3%. Democrat turnout was up 64%. Okay, Mississippi has photo ID. That's a reality. Just 52% in a solid red state chose a Republican ballot. Obviously, all the RINO congressmen were reelected. Nothing inspiring happened. They don't have state legislative elections, but this is Mississippi. You go to the Georgia district, Marjorie Taylor Greene seat, special election. We had Colton Moore, who is everything everyone ever wanted, stood up in the legislature. He got crushed by the guy endorsed by Trump, who refused to even talk about data centers. By the way, that's a Trump plus 37 district, but the Republican total was a jungle primary. But if you add up the Republican votes, it was only Trump plus 20. That's scrimmage line of D plus 17, about what I've been talking about elsewhere. Democrats, meanwhile, flipped a New Hampshire House District 7. This was a district Trump carried by 9, yet she won it by 4 points, the Democrat. So that's a 13-point Democrat overperformance. And that's something like their 30th consecutive House flip without a Republican flipping, a legislative seat. So this goes on and on, folks. So not only are we going to be left with a GOP federal trifecta that doesn't have a single good enduring victory, but actually cements things like Elizabeth Warren's red state gerrymander bill and forcing red states to adopt all forms of AI and data centers. I mean, this is what, like I told you, it's only the bad things that wind up being enduring. The good things are not enduring. And then you endorse all the RINOs in red states. And then you're so bad that Democrats eat up some of the red states, so you're only left with fewer red states. What are we left with? Like, for example, I was speaking with a friend of mine in the Georgia legislature. He was pointing out, at its peak, Republicans had 120 to 60, 2-to-1 majority after the 2014 election. It's ebbed, and now it's just 100 to 80. That will likely flip. Could be the Senate too, but I'm pretty sure about the Georgia House will likely go Democrat. Meaning until now, despite flipping once or twice with the presidential election, statewide it's been all Republican. That is definitely gonna flip. What is the movement we have? Where is this movement? Because, folks, I am not seeing it. I'm not seeing it one iota. So, folks, the only way to combat globalism, Agenda 2030, the land grabs, all this stuff, is localism. That, as bad as things get, we don't know where that scrimmage line will get, and Republicans are very talented at losing and are doing as good of a job to lose. But inevitably, we do know we will win Wyoming, we will win Oklahoma, we will win South Dakota. There are states that we will win, no matter how bad things get. Well, I'm sorry, not we. There are states where no matter what, the voters will reject Democrats. The question we have before us, is there going to remain one vestige of this world where we have a political representation that reflects the values of the majority of the people and will conserve our red state land, farms, ranches, currency, fiscal solvency, culture, demographics, ordered liberty, security, the twin threats of Islam and Antifa that aren't being dealt with in states like Texas properly? That's the question. I want to just start off before we introduce Andy again. I forgot to mention, there's a great story out of rural Oklahoma. KTUL TV reported on this after Google tried to bribe locals in Osage County to support a massive hyperscale data center. The Rock Volunteer Fire Department turned down a $250,000 donation from them. because of what they were doing. And that was very hard to do in a small town like that. Again, this is a county, I don't have the video here, but this is a county that Trump won by 41 points, and the people in the room were standing up and applauding. Okay? This is the future movement. If you want to know, we had the Tea Party. The last 10 years, we've had everything's Trump, online algorithms. This is where it's headed. We have the building blocks of a movement to beat globalism at a source local level in the areas that we can still conserve our way of life by saying no to solar, no to wind, no to data centers, no to carbon capture, no to smart cities, no to flock cameras, and yes, pursuant to today's retarded Elizabeth Warren bipartisan crap sandwich, no to Section 8 housing mandated and overdevelopment on our communities. Let the locals decide. The only institution we have that is starting and has started to be that future that we need to grow is the State Freedom Caucus network, whose president is with us today, Andy Roth. I wanted to get an update on the good, the bad, how we grow the movement. Hey, Andy, sorry for making you wait there, but thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
All right, Andy. Give us the 30,000-foot view. We're pretty late into this year's legislative sessions. Be honest with us. I know your guys are fighting hard. Is it a mixed bag of success? Where are we and where do we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, what I typically tell people is that we win no matter what, and that glosses over things a little bit. Like, we are winning on policy in a lot of our states, but when we lose, we expose the bad guys so that the voters are aware of it. As you've heard me say before, most people don't know who their state rep or their state senator is, but because our state freedom caucuses, whether it's the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, South Carolina Freedom Caucus, our new Minnesota Freedom Caucus, they are exposing things that have never, ever been exposed at the state level before. So I believe that we're winning no matter what, even when we lose. But to your point, the Wyoming Freedom Caucus just wrapped up their legislative session. The Wyoming Freedom Caucus is fully in charge of the state house, but they have a hostile state senate and a hostile governor. The Wyoming Freedom Caucus cut millions from the state budget. They tried to get rid of like the Wyoming Business Council slush fund, which is basically the Chamber of Commerce taking tax dollars to spend on all sorts of garbage. They were able to cut all sorts of stuff. The Senate pared that back a little, but at the end of the day, we sent a budget to the governor that cut spending in real terms. But then the governor line item vetoed a lot of stuff, and it ended up plussing up the budget. So that's a win because we told the voters what happened every single step of the way. But it still shows that Wyoming is not where it needs to be because its voters want what the Wyoming Freedom Caucus is delivering, but there's still too many liberal Republicans, both in the governor's mansion and in the state Senate, who are causing problems. One other example is in South Carolina. Things did not go well at all on the budget. They plussed it up. They funded all sorts of cronyism. And even though the South Carolina Freedom Caucus was screaming at the top of their lungs, the Democrats and the liberal Republicans had the votes to pass that budget. So it's a slog, but we started from zero, maybe even negative, and we're fighting as hard as we can, and we're getting there. It's just going to take time that we may not have.
No, and Andy, I think this is what people need to understand. The question is, do we have enough time? But there is a difference between 1 and certainly 5 to 10 good members and 0. I'm certainly finding that today with my sole battle against what would have been every conservative organization yelling about this, but now we don't believe in anything, care about anything other than the next algorithmic slop. So it's making a difference, and I see that. So you have this in West Virginia. I was so happy and excited about this because it's just a heartbreaking state where I mean, this has really animated me because I live in Maryland. It's next door. And you look upon West Virginia as the promised land. You go there and we vacation there and we go and we see these ugly, disgusting, vile wind turbines. Like it says in Deuteronomy, every idol on every beautiful high top mountain. And, they weren't even spinning. And then I see all the signs as we go to the Canaan Valley, and people have these signs out, very downscale homes, the type of people that MAGA was supposed to represent. No data centers, no data centers. And that state, they gave full tax exemptions and barred all localities from having any zoning other than what would accommodate their thing. So it's like me saying my son likes fixing cars, so he wants to fix cars. I'm going to have a car garage repair shop on my residential street. That's not a regulation. If I stop that you can't do that. So anyway, now they have a bill. They want to exempt them from every tax imaginable. Okay, we don't do that for power plants that supply the power. They suck the power. Describe what your Freedom Caucus is working on that and other issues.
Yeah, let me back up a little bit and just set the scene, because everybody does think that West Virginia is this great conservative state. Trump won 70-30 against Kamala Harris. So it's very, very conservative. The voters are. But if you look at the state legislature, you would think it's also conservative, because in the state house, there's 91 Republicans to 9 Democrats, 91 to 9. And in the state Senate, it's 32 to 2. These aren't super majorities. These are like super, super, super majorities. So you would think that West Virginia would be passing all sorts of amazing things on par with what DeSantis has done in Florida, but they're not. And the reason why is because the Republicans are arguably just as liberal as the Democrats, except for the West Virginia Freedom Caucus, of which we have just 6 members. But those mighty 6 members are now trying to expose all of this. There was one vote that just happened either this morning or yesterday, where West Virginia has on its books a backdoor red flag law, which allows the government to take guns away from its citizens. The West Virginia Freedom Caucus forced a vote, because it otherwise wouldn't have happened. They forced a vote to repeal the red flag law, and it was defeated overwhelmingly. I can't remember the roll call, but it was like 80-20. There were only 17 no votes, or 17 yes votes, to repeal the red flag law. That's the sort of situation we're in. And West Virginia is very pro-gun, but when you look at their legislature, it is very, very liberal. A lot of the Republicans in the legislature literally were Democrats with a D after their name. But once the tide started to turn in the state, they just put an R after their name and got reelected. Now, let me make one point. Governor Morrissey is, when he got elected last year, he was like, okay, we're going to do some conservative things. And he walked right into a buzzsaw with all these RINOs and Democrats. And I'm not saying Morrissey's perfect, but he's actually trying to cut the budget and trying to get rid of some stuff. And he is confronted with a very, very hostile legislature. And this red flag thing, this is just one example. Like it happens countless times in the session. And so if we're going to win, if the Freedom Caucus, the West Virginia Freedom Caucus, is going to win, every voter in West Virginia needs to know what's going on in Charleston and what's happening and how these people are taking away their freedoms and their rights every single day.
So Andy, look, my goal today is to ensure that you don't wind up with as few friends as I have. So I don't want to get you in trouble, and I won't mention names. But what you're saying is an indictment, not just of the West Virginia state legislators and adjacent similar state legislatures in other overwhelmingly Republican states. Because I remember complaining, and you and I used to talk about this for years, 2 decades ago, where we actually sometimes got tired of the abortion and gun issues. Not that we weren't strong on them, but that all too often that was the only thing these guys were good on. And then, they would use that to grow government and do all this bad stuff and the green energy and whatever. But now what you're telling me is we've actually gone backwards over the last decade, because this is the point. I'm not trying to black pill. You can't get the ball in the end zone if you think you already have it there. And what I'm trying to tell people is my concern is we've actually gone backwards in many ways. And what I want to bring this discussion to, and I hopefully you could shed some positive light on this and where we are. I'm looking at the primaries. And because we have no watchdogs anymore, all these conservative NGOs and figures, they either don't care, sometimes they even enable some of the people and organizations that are part of what's going on because they're just focused on sophistry or their Twitter accounts or whatever they're doing, or it's just whatever the president talks about, that's all they care about. And it's gotten to the point where we've gone backwards in primaries. It used to be in the Tea Party era, we had an automatic 30% against incumbents with a name filed on the ballot. Now, it was hard to get beyond that. Now it's actually at 18 is the new thing. We saw it. We saw it with Cindy Hyde-Smith yesterday. It's comatose. No one cares about primaries. So my question to you, Andy, is how do we get beyond this defeat mechanism of not just your West Virginia local RINOs, but a lot of mutual friends of ours that all they will be chanting the next number of months is, we got to beat the Democrats. Got to beat the Democrats. How many seats in the House Congress when it's lost already? How do we break that?
You mentioned being black-pilled before. I am thoroughly black-pilled in a lot of ways, especially at the federal level,
Yep.
precisely about what you're talking about. I do worry about the congressional races and the Senate races simply because there doesn't seem to be much fight going on. At the beginning of Trump's administration, when we were doging everything and we were doing all these amazing things, and then it came to a complete halt.
Yep.
Enthusiasm was very high back then, and now it's not. So I am black-pilled at the federal level, but at the state level, I'm pretty white-pilled in my little neck of the woods, which is our Freedom Caucus members are becoming household names in their areas. And last election cycle, and it's true, that was a presidential year, but all of our members, or over 95% of our members, got reelected. We kicked out 14 rhinos in South Dakota. We kicked out an assistant majority leader in South Carolina. We kicked out a majority leader in Idaho. We did what, not to talk my own book, but we did what we were supposed to do. We told the voters what we believe in and what we care about. And the voters were like, yeah, absolutely. Let's keep doing that. And so we are still doing that. And so I do think that at the state level, we're going to keep winning. Our Freedom Caucus members are. Now, we're not going to be able to revolutionize all red states in the primaries this summer, but I do think that rhinos are going to continue to lose their seats. Freedom Caucus members are going to continue to retain their seats and add more seats. But we only have 15 state Freedom Caucuses. We don't have 50. And it's going to be a while before we get all 50. So I wake up in the morning
yeah, I'm just saying,
I wake up in the morning and I take a black pill, but throughout the day I do take multiple white pills, and I go to bed optimistic, but then the cycle repeats itself.
And Andy, I am with you. So first of all, to your credit, you guys have not been up to bat yet. So we've had Texas, Arkansas, and North Carolina are the three states that had primaries so far, regularly scheduled, midterm primaries. None of them have a Freedom Caucus. And, to be fair, in Texas, there was a little bit more success in the legislature than federally, I would say. There were 2 committee chairs that were knocked out.
There were a lot of good conservatives that were defeated, though, or lost their primaries in the legislature. So I don't think it was that great. Not incumbents, but there were solid conservatives that should have been able to win, but because all
See,
the money and all the swamp money was backing these
look at you.
rhinos.
Look at
Yeah,
you getting to my blacker pill side. You're worse than me now. And like it did bother me because, I'm not giving an opinion on Ken Paxton and his life and whatever, but game theory wise, you will never get a bigger 800-pound gorilla challenger to an incumbent like in my lifetime. And you look down, it was very disappointing. I thought that would create like, some people were upset at me. No, Daniel, we had some successes, but what they were pointing to is very minor relative to the magnitude of a top of the ticket insurgent candidate against John Cornyn. You should have had a bunch of state legislative people, but to be fair, your network does not have an organization there yet, so you have not been up to bat. So I don't want to prejudge that. But again, some of it's not your fault. I'm very concerned. I share your view. I'm black pilled federally. We see you can't do anything because even in the 90-10, we can't do anything. So certainly in a 50-50 with a bunch of rhinos, you're not going to do anything. But in theory, I do see that I'm seeing state legislative races are more volatile than congressional races, that it takes less money. But our colleagues don't give a damn. They just don't. Like but they don't care. And it's not just legislative. They don't care about governor's races too. They still think that if you have a star, oh, who's going to take over Mark Wayne Mullen's seat? Dude, who's going to take over Kevin Stitt's seat? What do you think about
yeah.
that?
Yeah. No, just to go back to Texas, I spend an irresponsible amount of time following Texas politics because that's one state that desperately needs a Texas Freedom Caucus. But if Texas were its own country, it would be like the seventh or eighth largest country in the world. So that means money actually like dictates everything.
Yeah.
And that's why the swamp is so fully in charge down there, not just in Austin, but at the federal level too, with Cornyn being so ensconced as he is. The frustrating thing about national politics is that every 2 years there is like one single rhino senator who may be in jeopardy. There
Yeah.
aren't like six or seven or
It's
eight
not
of
enough.
them.
Yeah.
Right. So what Paxton has been able to do, I think, is amazing just because of all of the money that's in Texas. And I do think he's going to pull it out unless there's some shenanigans that occur
Yep.
with a Trump endorsement or with the SAVE Act or anything like that. Frankly, I still think Ken Paxton's going to pull that out. But in other states, because there's less money, there's it should be favorable to us, and I do think that it is favorable at the legislative level. But these governor races, there are so many red states that have awful
Awful.
governors. Mark Gordon in Wyoming is just he's literally a Democrat, and Brad Little in Idaho, and Gene
But he
Forte
got
in
Trump's
Montana.
endorsement.
Yeah,
We,
yeah.
we were certain we were going to get rid of him. We were certain we were going to get rid of him. Trump comes in. None of our allies give up. Bleepity bleep. By the way, I joked around before that Democrats could pass an Obamacare magnitude bill overnight, and if the algorithms or the president don't talk about it, they won't know or care. And if they do and support it, they'll support it too. I mean, we have to rebuild. There's got like we were told 2024 Trump's got to win. Okay, that's a long time ago. He won. You got what you wanted. We got to build this movement. And I just, if I were black
Well,
pilled, I wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm red pilled. The opportunity is there, but it's narrow.
Well, the one big giant white pill that I desperately hope I get to swallow, with my breakfast tomorrow morning or later this summer, I guess, is in Arizona and South Carolina because Andy Biggs, Freedom Caucus member, is running for governor.
Yep.
We have an Arizona Freedom Caucus. And when you combine a Freedom Caucus governor and a state Freedom Caucus together, they can do magical things, especially in a swing state like Arizona. And then we can do the same thing with Ralph Norman in South Carolina. He's running for governor. And we have an awesome South Carolina Freedom Caucus. If we can do those two things, they will be two shining lights across the country
Yep.
that people can look to. With DeSantis leaving, getting termed out in Florida, we no longer have that light to point to say everyone be like Florida.
Yep.
But we have that opportunity in Arizona and South Carolina, and maybe a couple of other places. But those two are the big
You,
examples that
you
I
know what?
hope
Let's
that
let's
we're
go
able to
down the
succeed in.
Rolodex. I know you're strong enough to do this without preparation. I'm just gonna go along the states that Trump won, most of them overwhelmingly. Um, Alabama, KIV is term limited. So I'm assuming the senator, he's got it pretty much.
Yeah, Tuberville's got it, I think, but he's going to have a legislature that is incredibly hostile to
That
any
legislature
sort
is
of
something
conservative
else.
reform. I mean, I mentioned West Virginia before. Alabama's worse than that. So just to give you an idea, the Democrats overwhelmingly have a majority in both chambers, and I'm not just saying the ones with a D after their name, but the Democrats with an R after their name. So
Yep.
that's a tough state to
Yeah.
deal with.
Alaska.
I hope he wins, but that's the problem.
Yeah, that's tough.
Alaska,
Alaska.
same problem. The legislature is just awful, and not only is Alaska a problem, but and I think they got away with it, got rid of this, but the Democrats and the Republicans there literally have like a formal agreement of
Yeah.
how they're going to uh, share governing there, just like in Texas and a couple of other places. It's really bad.
Yeah, see, I mean, the thing with Arizona is I wish Andy Biggs could be in another state. It's going to be very, very tough with Republicans stinking up the joint to win a state like that. Florida, is very tough now to try to replace that. That's a big problem. Idaho, he's running for a third term because Murphy's Law, where we need term limits, we don't have them, and where we don't want them, we do have them. Um,
Yeah.
Iowa, you got Iowa's a real mess. If a guy like Feenstra is able to win there, hopefully Trump doesn't come in and endorse him. I look around the red states. I'm just going to read them and then tell me if there's anyone I'm missing. But Kansas, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma, um, Tennessee, Texas, Wyoming. Um, I don't know. I mean, do you see any stars in?
None of those are screaming out as amazing
No.
opportunities. Yeah.
I skipped over South Dakota because we have Jim Hansen there, but this is another one of those things where, to be quite candid, we lack a movement. So you have two establishment candidates come in, and then you have another guy come in that's a self-funder, and this is becoming a big problem. Puts on the red hat, Trump, 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 MAGA, 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 reads conservative Twitter, but then when the algorithm doesn't tell him what to say, and he has to talk about data centers, then I think that's a good idea. So then, I mean, but he has a ton of money to run like he's a right winger. So it's splitting the conservative vote. You saw the Emerson poll has it like um, Dusty Johnson's at 27, so he's under 35, could be drawn into a runoff. And then all the other ones are clustered. Jim, Hansen's in the game, but, you know, how do we, how do
No,
we,
I mean, I kind of think South Dakota has some potential, simply because Dusty Johnson is their lone congressman. He should have fairly high name ID, and yet a majority of South Dakota voters
yeah,
either don't know him or don't like him. The polling I saw had him at 28%, which I think is pretty abysmal for someone in his position. So
yeah.
I, I think I think South Dakota has an opportunity to prevent Dusty from becoming governor, and if they do that, I think that's fantastic. And we have a South Dakota Freedom Caucus, and they've been hostile to Dusty, and rightfully so. So, yeah, you mentioned all these states. South Dakota's top tier or second tier as a good opportunity for us to pick something up.
Yeah, but I think overall that we are 11 years into MAGA and almost every red state is up. Most of them are up this cycle for governorships. It's 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 sad and it's a big indictment. And my question to you is, I've had this debate with friends of mine, fellow colleagues here at the Blaze. Is it that voters don't give a damn about primaries and they're apathetic and don't know, don't care? Or is it a lack of leadership of conservative NGOs and media?
I don't think it's a apathy or they don't care. I think it's because they're being inundated with so much that they have to prioritize. When they turn on the TV or open up their phone, they're hearing about the war in Iran, the war in Ukraine, inflation, Trump, Congress,
Yep.
insider trading of congressmen and senators, and like, then what's after that? Well, they've got to worry about their family, they've got to worry about their kids softball game or basketball game. Oh, they've got to worry about, going to church and doing other things. What's left? Well, I would argue that you know stop prioritize family first, obviously, but pay attention to what's going on in your state level, because if you do pay
Yeah.
attention and you are informed, you'll make the right decision. I trust the voters in that respect. And so the way we solve this problem is making sure that our state freedom caucuses are as loud and as vocal as possible about what's going on in their states. And I do believe it, and I see it every day. There are voters that didn't know, didn't care about state politics until Freedom Caucus
Yep.
came into their state, and they do now pay attention. So I believe we've cracked the code. I figure we have figured out how to change hearts and minds. It's just a slow
Yep.
slog because we've started from such a bad position to begin with.
So you're agreeing with me then, in other words, that if certain
If you have the right leadership and
leadership
you
would put this on their plate, they would eat it.
and you're loud enough about it to break
Yeah.
through all the
Yeah.
noise,
Yeah.
the voters will respond our
Yeah.
way. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I myself can't even keep up on top of all this. I didn't even know about the gun thing in West Virginia. Like, I know they're bad, and then I'm looking like, no, it can't be that bad. They're even bad on that, but yes, it's that bad, and we just basically have, you know, we were building a very substantial movement to hold the Republican Party accountable, and now that entire movement has just become a Republican Party defeat mechanism and an incumbent protection racket or just kind of noise making machine that distracts people. Do you agree with my contention that going back to Texas, you're never going to get a better quality person than Chip Roy? And I don't just mean ideologically, but also the fact that he built up a bunch of name, idea, notoriety, that he entered the race with the most notoriety for attorney general. This is the perfect position for him because you need the largest red state AG when the Democrats are likely going to, pendulum's going to swing back. They'll be present. You're going to have to fight Islam, Antifa, weaponization. It's going to be 100 times worse. You're going to need that. We thought we had that in the bag. You have a random guy comes with millions of dollars, special interest, green energy, dumps money in against Chip. I guess they know something about his opponent that we don't because that guy claims he's a conservative. I have come to the conclusion that if a guy like Chip cannot win, and it's that much about money, that primaries are a farce and we need to go to state conventions. And before you answer, let me just assert this. Greg Abbott got 82% in the primary. Yet we all know if the Texas Republican convention would choose the nominee, and it wasn't even that top tier, it wasn't much of a tiered nominee against him, but even the most kind of far-flung guy would win. He can't even stand before the convention, much less win a vote there. Heck, I have fallen down on this. I've advocated it, but I haven't come up with a way how to take it to the next level. Is this something that we can look at?
To switch to conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that conventions are the way to go. The problem that you're talking about and the problem that we struggle with constantly is the money. And switching to a convention means that you have to basically completely reform the state parties, which are captured by money. You have to completely um, overwhelm all of the money to interests, whether it's the business interests, the environmentals, all that stuff. You've got to overcome all of that in order to switch to a convention. So I'm absolutely on board with it, but it's the same problem in all of our fights, which is that all of the money is on the other side, and we've got to figure out a way to combat that. And the only solution we have is that we have to just be loud enough where people can't ignore us. I absolutely 100% believe that Texas can transform itself with Chip getting elected as AG. There isn't a more important AG race in the country than getting Chip elected. And if he wins, not only will Texas improve, but it will, he- people will follow Chip, and people will start to run for office who wouldn't otherwise do it because
Yep.
they see some hope. And if Chip wins, then we can start taking over the legislature. Then we can start running candidates for governor, for U.S. Senate, for Congress, and they will be able to win because they're able to break through the noise. So I absolutely hope Chip can wins. Runoffs are funny things. You can get second place in the primary, but then win the runoff, and that's where Chip's at. And I think he can do it.
Yep.
But man, it's the most important race in the country.
But again, it's all about the money, like you said, that they use the money from the special interests who know they're going to do A, but they use the money to run on B, what the conservative voters want to hear, and it's very hard to break through that. The thing is, some state parties are a dump, but the Texas Republican Convention, again, I mean, they're with us. You're saying what? It's the party leadership structure that would need to change the rules.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak
Sure.
too intelligently about this, but the Republican Party is a private entity. It is not a public entity. So private entities can create their own rules on how they elect their leaders.
Yep.
So there is case law that says if the Texas Republican Party wanted to switch entirely to conventions, they could. And just like in every other state, Utah used to have a pretty good convention. Iowa, uh, North Dakota, Virginia, they can do these conventions, but they get captured by the money that the state will give them in order to run primaries. And so
Yes.
it's a
Yep.
big nasty cobweb of stuff. But there should be no government interference in how a private
Yes.
entity chooses its leaders.
You have no
And
right to a primary. This was the progressive era. Heritage had a great article about this years ago. It was a progressive era reform. Um, the bottom line is conventions aren't perfect. There is no perfect process. But you look at Utah, where the Cox won 2-1 in the primary, but he lost 2-1 in the convention from a pretty low level challenger. And if we had conventions, A, we would have amazing recruitment. B, even if they won, but the reelect. So throughout their tenure, here's the
yeah,
difference. It would be known you could run whatever ads you want to millions of people, what a conservative you are. If you screw, the activists will know you're done. So either they wouldn't get elected, or if they are, they'd be held in check and they'd have to vote with us. I really think this is something worth fighting for. Two quick things before we go. Do you agree with my contention that some of our friends, I think, sometimes view this as a litmus test of how conservative you are? And that term has kind of been bastardized. A lot of people are corrupt, but a lot of people they go to Bible study with you, and I think they're well intentioned, they're decent. To me, the difference between DeSantis and everyone else is it that he's more conservative? Certain extent. He's willing to punch through special interests and put individual liberty, individual dignity, land ownership, quality of life. That's what conserving our way of life in totality, the whole of people, quality of life, crime. He talks about all these issues over parochial special interest economic development. I'm seeing in general, that's the central argument that your members in South Carolina, in like Jim Shaw in Oklahoma, are having with the Republicans.
Yeah, I think there are a lot more conservatives in elected office than we think. What separates them from truly courageous people is political courage. To what you spoke of with DeSantis, is that it's one thing to believe in some conservative value. It's another for how hard you're going to fight and how long you're going to carry the battle through. And I kind of think of it as like the mirror test, which is, can you wake up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror and say you did everything you could in order to fight for some conservative priority? And I think DeSantis looks at himself in the mirror and says yes. And I think a lot of conservatives look in the mirror and say no, but they make an excuse to say,
Yep.
oh, well, we'll fight again another day.
This is the biggest
Political
problem.
courage
Yeah.
is the thing that
Yes.
separates.
The men from the boys. And
Yeah.
that is the crux of the State Freedom Caucuses. When a lot of people, as you know, I had a conversation, I can't remember. There's this guy running, must have been for Congress, and I texted a friend, like, what do you think of him? It's like, oh, he seems pretty decent because it seems like a good conservative. It's like, oh, is he joining the Freedom Caucus? Oh, no way. Oh, okay. See, meaning there are people, they're not frauds. And there's a lot of people like, Daniel, what's your problem with him? Like, look, I don't have a problem with him. But if the status quo, pursuant to this hour-long conversation, is that we have such an infinitesimal percentage of fighters in the reddest of red states, you're not going to change the game with a non-Freedom Caucus guy. Very rarely, unless he has kind of, his own eclectic reasons for not joining. But the point is, you're not going to change anything. If you had a Freedom Caucus majority and you had some of these guys, they'll go along with it. They're decent. They're decent, live biblical lives, and I don't have a problem with them. They're not game changers when we're behind and we need to change the game.
The best quote I think in politics is by a Democrat of all people, John Dingell. He was like in the U.S. House for like 50 years, and I think his wife is still in
Yep,
office.
Michigan, yeah.
Um, he has a great quote where he said, "I'll let you write the substance and I'll write the procedure and I'll screw you every time." And what he meant is, you can write whatever bill you want. You want to cut taxes down to zero, that's fine. But I'm in charge of how that bill proceeds through the process. And I will beat you every time because I'll either dump it into a committee that will kill it, or I'll write the rules on how it's debated on the floor and I'll kill it. And what we try to educate lawmakers on is, if you play by the rules that the swamp controls, you're going to get screwed every time. And what that means is that, like your example where there was this great conservative who didn't want to join the House Freedom Caucus. Whoever that person is, they're going to Congress and they're going to play by the rules, and
Yes.
they're going to be very conservative, but they're going to lose every single time because they're not willing to pick fights with the leadership. And that is the if you can point to anything, that is the difference between a Freedom Caucus lawmaker and a conservative lawmaker, is that we reject the way that the swamp controls the process of legislating.
And that is, if there's one thing you guys take away from this when you go to your ballots, which is very tough, local, state, it's even hard running for Congress. They often don't have big track records. If it's not statewide office, even then sometimes they don't. And people, I think some conservatives are conservative in all the wrong ways. They like conserving the same incumbents or people. And if you don't have a rap sheet of, okay, you voted for gay marriage, you voted for amnesty, you voted for transgenderism, well, I don't see a reason to toss them out. But no, if we're not winning and we need to win, they're status quo people. They're not going to fight the special interests and they're not going to fight the party. And all these people in the abstract, if you ask them before the game, pregame show, is the GOP weak? Yeah, weak.
Yeah,
And in the
yeah.
middle of it, it's like, look, I'm conservative, but I want to be productive. Like, what do you want me to be? Be one of these lunatics? Like, well, then what are you doing? And this is what we see all too often. You'll know it when you see it if it's one of those members. And this is a good litmus test. If you're not going to join a Freedom Caucus and there's not some really eclectic reason that you know why he's not, it usually
That
there's
that's your answer.
that's your
Yeah.
answer. There's a reason for it. Okay, 2 minutes. We're over an hour, and I appreciate your time. I got to get this out. Um, personal conduct. I got this is something that is really bothering me. The Republican Party is not just the fact that it goes on with special interests, but probably part and parcel is they've lost their soul. I remember when the adultery stuff started and it was like a big thing. It started with the Democrats, but the Republicans didn't tolerate it. Then it started with the Republicans, and now it's like a resume enhancer. I mean, it's rampant, rancid. Never before have we had a party that talked about Christ is King, and Christianity and Christian nationalism. We have that more than ever. Yet never before have we had such a plethora of members that are just a bunch of freaking degenerates. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's rampant. It's worse than we even know. Is there a way that you're going to start with the culture of the Freedom Caucus to start making it clear that, look, if you're going through problems of like, you're doing the homosexual stuff, you're doing the adultery stuff, or whatever that is, we're not here to judge you. But when we're trying to promote and conserve biblical family values, could you maybe sit this one out and not try to represent us?
I guess what I would say there is that this is a problem that you're never going to get rid of. You can try to minimize it, but imagine it from a first-time lawmaker's perspective, which is they were making $30,000 a year, whether on food stamps or they're buying choice meat at the grocery store, or they're barely skimping by. And then they get elected to Congress and they're making $200,000 and they're ordering off the wine menu. That's intoxicating to everybody. Nobody's immune to that. Now, once you start engaging in that sort of behavior, you will do whatever it takes to maintain that position of ordering off the wine list and all of the behavior that comes with it that is now in front of you all the time. It tempts you in ways that if you're deep in your faith and you are morally grounded and you have a strong family back home, you can withstand that. But it's all too intoxicating to way too many people. And it's not just the $200,000 paycheck, it's the big paychecks that come later
Later,
when
yeah.
you leave office and you become a lobbyist or you advance to run for higher office. There are all these temptations that are confronted you, and it's becoming worse and worse. And I think it's just decades of declining value in the things that we believe in. And so just I believe, again, not to talk my own book, but I do believe that the Freedom Caucus members, they're the ones that are grounded most at home, most at church, and most in the conservative values that they talk about. And so it's just a fact of politics. We're in a sleazy business and it's going to happen. We just got to minimize it.
But certainly when you see it coming from the get-go and you know it's there before the election, it's got to be a factor in a primary. Just like,
It
we're like,
should.
okay,
You're right.
you know what I mean? Like, you support green energy land grabs, you should be persona non grata. If you have a guy that, I mean, again, we could debate theologically and logistically and practically what you do when you have an R and a D. And I'm not getting involved in it. I'm just saying it's gotten to the point. It's not even a factor in primaries. It's not even any. We just don't care. And I don't think God's going to smile upon a movement that embraces that. And theologically, but also practically, to your point, typically, if you're kind of doing that stuff, that you're not going to give into the temptation of special interests. And to our point, probably not going to happen. There's always exceptions to that. But in general, we need to move away from that. Andy, thanks so much for indulging my hard-hitting curveballs there.
You bet.
Thanks for what you do. Again, State Freedom Caucus, what's the website?
StateFreedomCaucus.org. You can also catch me on X. I'm at Andy Roth. And we also have a new podcast called Freedom Caucus Unfiltered. So check that out.
Awesome. Freedom Caucus Unfiltered. Yeah, we'll put a link to that. Thanks so much, Andy. This was absolutely terrific. Good luck on the primaries, and we'll speak soon. And folks, we are way over time, but he's just one of my favorite people alive that he could literally say he tried. He was working on primaries before me. He tried. He did everything he could federally. And then he realized it wasn't working, going to the States. If every NGO, think tanky organization influencer would be like Andy Roth, we would have a different voter base. Don't tell me the people are inherently, well, yeah, of course the people are inherently the problem. They don't know all this stuff. The problem is, look in the mirror of your favorite conservative influencer, go down that roster of the TPUSA speakers list, and then go to Andy Roth. You'll see the difference. And until tomorrow, that's just the way it is.